This is Maharajas of Scale, a podcast where we go behind the scenes and talk to founders who are demolishing the myths around building and scaling a big business in India. These are the stories that have shattered the assumptions around Indian consumers and are changing the game completely. I am Krishna Jonakadla, serial entrepreneur, co-founder of Flit, the fashion locator in town, and startup mentor, bringing you these stories. Hey listeners, this is Krishna from Maharajas of Scale. We have a young, dynamic, and very interesting entrepreneur today, Varun Sheth from Ketto, who has perhaps done a lot to change the lives of thousands of people that only some of us can dream about. Varun, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me over. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. So, Varun, tell us a little more about yourself and what you're working on right now.
Sure. So, a bit about myself. I'm born and brought up in Bombay. Spent pretty much my full life in Mumbai suburbs, and went to a school around and a college also around, just a few kilometers away from my house. Spent pretty much of my early childhood doing what most young people would do, watching a lot of sports, playing a lot of PlayStation, not really studying. Yeah, and just spent my teenage years wasting time and whiling it away.
What are you working on right now?
Right now, actually, a lot of different things. Just in our current product, we're launching a few new verticals that we planned out last year. Something outside our current domain, but still in the larger category of people who we interact with. So we're pretty excited about 2020 as the company is moving in a new direction. So we're excited to launch the product out to the people and get their insights and thoughts.
Can you elaborate a bit? So, when you say current product, I'm assuming you're referring to Keto.
Yeah. So the first 8 years, of our existence, we've been very focused around crowdfunding and seeing that how we can help as many people as possible to raise funds. Could be for any cause that is possible. But over the last 12 months, we've been really thinking about, what are we as a company, what our goal is, what our mission is, where do we want to go, where do we see ourselves in the next 5 years, how do we get there. So there's a lot of been a lot of self introspection across the company, both with senior management and the founders as well. And we basically have thought about what do we want to do next. And on that thought, we've started building a few products. So to give some more context, we started as a crowdfunding company, but we've realized that a big focus of where crowdfunding really works at a scale was healthcare. And over the last 12 months, we've moved our mission from being a crowdfunding company to be a healthcare company. And the view has been that how do we solve more problems in the healthcare space and in the healthcare domain. So the new product that we're launching is to do something in the healthcare space. It's a little early right now to announce it, but we'll be talking about it really soon.
Interesting. So you achieved a fairly significant degree of scale with your current platform and product, right? Talk to us a little about the kind of scale that you achieved there.
Sure. So the last 3 years have been super exciting for us. We've gone from about having about 300 or 1,000 donors to about 5.5 million donors on our platform. And in terms of funds raised, we've gone from about raising, about 50 crores to about, 500 crores in the last 3 years.
Interesting. So from 300,000 to upwards of 5.5 million. What actually led to that kind of scale? It seems like an unprecedented scale, at least within that short window of 3 years.
I think one was figuring out the right product market fit. I think the first 3 4 years went in figuring out right product market fit. I think once we realized what was really working, it was just a matter of putting more money, adding more fuel to the fire, and that's we saw the multiplier effect coming in play rapidly, and yeah, saw a huge bump up in terms of our volumes and growth. So yeah, it was a mix of a lot of things coming together. One was just market conditions, people coming online, transacting. Second was us figuring out what is working on the platform, what our customers really want, and what they want to come back for. Third was even the team coming together in terms of some good senior managers that we hired. Those things coming in, falling in place. So yeah, it was a mix of like three, four things that really got us that J curve going.
Interesting. Sure, you would have caught the attention of a lot of listeners, and you certainly caught my attention with the mention of product market fit. We'll come back to product market fit in just a minute or two. So I'm now intrigued by the beginnings. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 32.
Wow. Okay. You started this about 8 years ago?
That's correct.
Wow. Okay. In your intro, you said you spent your time like any youngster whiling away, playing games and stuff. It seems like, in some sense, an incredulous thing to do, especially this being a crowdfunding, almost a purpose-based charity platform. How did that happen? What was the spark that got ignited, and somewhere you realized that, hey, this is something that I should be working on? And talk to us about that beginning.
Sure. So I think it came from a mix of my background. So I'd studied finance when I was in college, and that was a strong area of interest for me, and thereby which I always thought that if I ever started a company, it would be good to start it in, or it would be great to do something in the financial domain. With that thought and the view that the internet was going to be a very exciting place to do business, coupled with the idea that can, how you can use internet to raise money for practically everything on anything. How you know 8 years back you could buy everything on the internet, right? Amazon was very popular already globally. So my view was that how can fundraising become as popular as buying, and how can the internet be used to raise money? So it was a mix of three, four things that I was really interested in. With that, I just thought that the internet was going to be the new exchange to raise money, and that's how the idea of crowdfunding came along.
Interesting. So we have seen several other crowdfunding platforms in the country, Founding Fuel. .com being one of them. But when we look at what you are doing, it almost feels like it's almost exclusively philanthropy driven and charity driven, isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's interesting. So and I love how you're putting it. Amazon achieved scale in e-commerce, and you're thinking you want to drive scale in crowdsourcing and charity as well. That's great. But was there a altruistic or let's do good to the world kind of a streak, or was it strictly that this seems like an unaddressed area? Let's look at it. What really drove the philanthropic or the charitable side of things?
I think it was, I would say, my first job. I think after graduating, my first job was in the field of finance, and I think doing that for a while, I really thought that I did not want to do that for the rest of my life. Doing something which did not have meaning or impact didn't really make sense. Why someone would spend so many hours doing that? So I think it was definitely my first job which got me thinking that how can time be spent to do something more impactful and meaningful, and unless your work really had meaning, you're not, if you're really not creating an impact through your work, which is what you'll end up doing pretty much the whole day, then what were you really doing? So I think that's when the whole idea of and thought of impact really came in play. That how do you do something which is impactful, plus online, plus as a financial service company, or from a financial service angle. So it was a mix of all those things, and yeah, that's what really got me going and still gets me going.
That's pretty interesting. And you're 32 now. You were all of 24 back then, and that's pretty loaded. pretty philosophical stand to take at that sort of an age where everybody is dreaming about maybe cars and fancy gadgets and maybe traveling the world and maybe beefing up. Instagram wasn't as popular, maybe in some sense making some sort of a social media impact. What was the job that you had? Was it in some sort of an investment bank?
Yeah, it was actually I was an interest rate swap trader. So it was a financial service company where my job was to track interest rates and see if interest rates would go down or go up, and then recommend banks to basically buy or sell interest rate swaps to hedge their interest rate risk.
I see. Sounds exotic in the financial services world, at least.
It only sounds exotic. That's it.
Okay. So let's talk about that initial jump then. And how did you get started with Ketto? Did you have a co-founder? What sort of thought process did you go through? And how were those initial steps?
Sure. Yeah. So we were actually three co-founders. It's three of us: Zahir, Kunal, and me. And we all connected at different points in time to realize that this is the idea that we really wanted to work on, and really commit our time. In terms of the thought process, I think one was to do with just not enjoying my current job, and not enjoying where it was going. And second was the whole excitement of things going online, right? I think that's when Flipkart had just started raising like large rounds of financing. You know, they just started raising large rounds of financing, and a lot of people have started reporting and covering the tech space in India. So I think that had, of course, got to do a lot with us saying that this the whole online commerce space is like becoming hot in India, and there's a very interesting opportunity that we should definitely work on. So I think it was a mix of both, one not enjoying currently what I was doing, and second just doing something online when everything had started going online.
Okay. So, finance background, and you said the three of you connected at different points in time. What I meant when about the initial start was how did you pull the team together? When did you, was it a website that you launched initially? Was it an app? How did you start? Did you resign or did you moonlight for a while and then eventually jump on when it scaled? Talk to us about some of those things.
Sure. So I think the first 6 months when I was working on this, I was doing it at my current job only, just trying to meet people and figure out and see if I want to do it, get a lot of feedback, and see if there was an opportunity for something like this to work in a country like India. So I think 6 months was on the job was when I really went around asking if this idea would work. And I think after I got about 60% of the people who said that it could work, I think that's when I quit my job and really started working on it full time. Once we started on once I got down to working on it full time, basically I started reaching out and connecting with my current co-founders to see if they would be interested to work on an opportunity like this. And with that, we basically created like a first beta version of a website, which we put it up after like about 8 9 months of working on it with a little of our own capital. And once we launched it to the public, we launched it out. It didn't really turn out to be the way we expected. Let's just say that.
I see. It very rarely happens that the first version of the product that you launch succeeds. Let's dig in a little deeper. What exactly happened there?
Firstly, the product did not work, of course, as we expected it would. The user experience was pretty crappy. A lot of the elements that we thought, we would want in our version one, because there was a massive product delay, we just launched it without it because we were getting really anxious about when this is going to happen. So we just went with what we had. Third was that a lot of people that we had met before launching were said, we'll definitely sign up, we'll participate, we'll help you with X, Y. A lot of those things just turned out to be talk and didn't materialize when we actually had a product. I think those things, and of course, because we put on very little capital of our own, we wanted to further invest in the product, but we just didn't have that money to take it from, say, version 1 to version 1.1. So then we had to just go out and sell what we had built and get customers on it and get their feedback and get them to use the product. So yeah, it was a difficult time in terms of just getting people to use it.
Interesting. So, how do you know Kunal? Is he related?
No, we're not related. Actually, we met through someone we know in common. He was actually working on a similar idea. He was just meeting people and having conversations around this idea when someone that we know in common just connected us and say, hey, you guys are trying to do something similar, so why don't you all two connect and see if you all want to work on this project together.
I see. So when you wanted to go from version 1 to 1.1, like you mentioned, having somebody like Kunal, at least an outsider would presume that you're going to get certain visibility, some maybe connections here and there. Was that tough in spite of having Kunal as one of the co-founders?
It was easy in terms of just like getting celebrities and actors, but in terms of customers, it was tough. Yeah, it didn't get easy.
I see. Interesting. What about the fundraise side of things?
Yeah, I didn't get easy. We actually both of us must have at least gone to like about 1995 investors who rejected the idea in terms of investing. But yeah, we finally were able to close around through this network in Calcutta called Calcutta Angels, which was just starting up like an angel network who basically agreed and like invested a small seed round in the company, which basically helped us to go from version 1 to like version 1.1, 1.2 onwards.
Interesting. Great. So how big was that round?
We did about at that time about 100k US, about 60-65 lakhs.
Okay. Okay. That's pretty decent. It's a good seed size investment.
That's correct.
Okay. And when by this time you had quit your job, you were full time in it, were any of the usual worries of, is this going to go anywhere? Do I have to go back to a job creep into your mind?
Yeah, always they still do.
Okay. Okay. So let's dig in on the customer, user, and the product side of things. You touched upon product market fit. What was the initial hypothesis? The current hypothesis, at least to me, looks like, for instance, a lot of us, get requests on WhatsApp and occasionally get direct phone calls as well from charitable organizations saying, okay, this person is sick or that person needs surgery or so and so. Can you contribute? While a lot of us do mean well, the biggest problem that we encounter is we have no clue who is genuine, who is really in need. We have, even if it is a genuine need, we have no idea how the funds are being used. So it looks like in the current scheme of things, that's at least the hypothesis. Helping in scenarios like that is where you're largely focused on. Was that where you started, and what were some issues with the platform and issues around product market fit back then?
So we basically started initially. The idea was that we should be a platform for everything, where anybody can come and raise funds for any kind of project. Initially, we were excited about like there could be innovative projects or like social entrepreneurs trying to build products. We can potentially help them out to raise money. We really tried that for the first few years to see how to get small businesses, social entrepreneurs, even small charities, nonprofits to use the network, to use the platform, and to start raising money. But I think the first few years we realized that that was not really going to scale. We just didn't see it scaling. We just didn't see people coming back and like making transactions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. We just found it difficult on both sides, both to generate the demand and supply on the platform. And we realized that for any marketplace to work, we need to at least one side should be available, right? Either the demand side or supply side, and you put in a lot of effort to get the other side going. So one side has to be the easy one, which was not really happening in our case. We had to generate both demand and supply here. So yeah, we started thinking here in terms of, okay, this is not going to work. What do we do next? And do we pivot and become a different business in itself, or do we spend more time running this and try some new categories out? So yeah, it was a mix of a lot of discussions and brainstorming that we said, okay, let's pilot out the healthcare aspect of crowdfunding and see how well that works, and see how we can potentially generate both the demand and supply side here. So after like a year and a half of piloting that, we started seeing that yes, there was a constant demand for people who need money for healthcare treatment to use this platform, and we saw that number growing on a month-on-month basis. And in terms of giving money, we saw people liked giving for healthcare. They came back again and gave multiple times because it was very easy for them to, one, self verify and check if this was genuine, even off the platform, by just going and directly contacting the hospital or meeting the patient or talking to the family or seeing medical reports or talking to doctors. And of course, the impact also was the update or the impact was quickly received, so it didn't have to wait for like months to get a update. The impact could be seen in a very short period of time. So that's what they really enjoyed to see, and that's what we started seeing that's why this aspect of crowdfunding is working very well, and this is what we should be focusing on.
Interesting. So you are then solving that verifiability problem of an illness or a disease, whereby whoever is on it, we know for sure is indeed in need of that particular donation or help.
That's correct.
Interesting. Okay. So looks like you had a pretty interesting and a testing first 3 4 years. You are a for-profit platform, aren't you?
That's correct.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad you positioned it that way, because if you make it non-profit, possibly somewhere along the way, substandard service possibly goes out. Maybe you can't support it with the right kind of resources. Was that the reason why you went for profit, or you always intended it to be a business of sorts?
I think it was all about the people, right? So we knew that if we wanted to attract the best talent and and retain them for long periods of time, we had to look at it from a for-profit perspective, where everybody in the value chain was incentivized to work really hard to really scale this. So that was one of the biggest views of why it should be for-profit, because in the non-profit side, we knew that to get good talent is fine, but to retain talent over a long period of time in the non-profit space becomes extremely difficult. So yeah, and we basically knew that we wanted to be self-sustainable. We didn't want to keep going to donors and raising grants over a long period of time. So yeah, and even in terms of the Indian system, it's just easier to be a for-profit than non-profit.
So, digging into the model just a bit, what sort of a role do you play? You play financial assistance and monitoring of the implementation role and closing the feedback loop with the donor. Does that need? Is that what you do, or do you do something more?
So we do multiple things, right? We One is educate our campaigners how best to use the platform. One is we provide them the platform and the technology. Second is we to give them assistance in terms of how they can best use the platform and raise maximum funds possible. Third is that we help them with the content in terms of what is the kind of content that really works, how should be written, rewrite at times, how to best present their content. Fourth is we basically guide them in terms of how they can best use their own social media platforms to get as many people to convert to be donors as possible. We also basically reach out to our own networks. We've built our own large enough network on social media, which keep giving on a repeat basis. So yeah, so how do we basically get our universe of donors also to start giving to unknown people? And basically, next last is how do we provide a easy financial system where they can review view at any given point of time, get contributions from anywhere in the world, be able to quickly withdraw it into their accounts. So yeah, it's a bunch of all these things.
I see. So, along this way, the scale journey, you talked about the key shifts that you made. One is from enabling MSME and smaller social entrepreneurs to raise funds, to maybe moving into the health problem social funding space. On the operation side and on the journey side, what were some inflection points that sort of convinced you that you were really on to something?
I think one was the hospitals, right? Actually, one was doctors more. I think working with doctors just made us realize that once we started seeing more health cases, we just saw that the volume of patients that each doctor had who really could not pay for the treatment. And that's when we realized that if we're able to get even a small portion of these patients that are unable to pay for the treatment for us sitting at a doctor's OPD clinic, then the opportunity could be huge. So I think that was definitely one huge inflection point that we saw, that if we had really focused and worked closely with doctors and educated them about how this platform could help their patients, it could be a huge opportunity. So that was like one big one. And the second, I think, was even payments, right? I think since digital payments like UPI has come, I think that's been a big inflection point for us as well in terms of people coming and transacting online.
I see. So, somewhere along the way, when you discover people that are not able to afford healthcare, do you see a subset of people that are perhaps not aware of, let's say, health insurance plans and other sorts of assistance that are provided either by government or some other assistance plans? And do you enable them at all? Because that would look like that would be another plausible way so that they don't keep coming back to the platform. While there is in some sense a conflict of interest there because you're all about enabling it, but maybe in terms of avoiding something of that sort and for them not to go through this harrowing experience of wondering, will they get funded or not. Have you already extended to that or thinking, or do you don't see yourself going there?
So we do a bit of that where we do ask them if they've availed any of the government schemes, and most of the times we've seen people who come to us, they've already tapped these things out, right? Because crowdfunding is no guarantee that you'll raise money. Some people do, some people don't, right? So we've seen that generally people come to crowdfunding once they've tried all these sources have been tried. So yeah, we don't take them through any government scheme, but we're aware that they are aware of government schemes before they come to us.
So it's mostly a last resort option for them.
That's correct.
Okay. How long was it before you had your first donation, or and how was that first 100 or first 500 transactions? How long and how was that journey?
I think the first, I would say, 1,000 was probably took us like a year to get the first 1,000 transactions.
Okay.
It was a pretty slow shooting process where it was just where literally we were just trying to force everybody we knew to donate. That's about it. We just force our friends, family members, and push them to use the platform, make a contribution, you know. But yeah, we saw a few sparks with a few of the campaigns that performed really well. Some we just got lucky. So one was around the Winter Olympics, where one athlete just stumbled upon our platform and he put up his cause. He's a pretty popular athlete. His name is Shiva Keshavan. So he used the platform to raise to go for the Winter Olympics. And because he was a really popular athlete in his domain, we did see a lot of people who knew him personally, indirectly, not only from India but even in his sport from different parts of the country, come forward and support him and contribute towards the campaign. So that basically really moved the needle for us, that one campaign. And then yeah, the idea was that how do we replicate this?
I see. So when you scaling up a startup means scaling up multiple things, right? In some sense, it's like all those balls in the air that a juggler is juggling. Having been an entrepreneur myself, many times it feels that way, that you are possibly wearing 8 or 10 hats, and you're forced to possibly leverage all the expertise that you have in all of those subjects. What was the personal journey like? You had just been a trader on the financial side. What was your personal journey like?
I think from a personal journey perspective, at least one advantage I would say I had was I was not paying rent, right? So I was living at my parents' house, which basically put the pressure off where I didn't have to make a monthly income to pay rent or pay any EMI. I didn't have any debt or loan. So that made it easy in terms of no responsibilities. So that was really helpful, at least for some time, uh, being not having any responsibility to pay anything. And that's, I think, one of the biggest advantages of starting young, where you don't have responsibilities. So it's the best time to learn, fail, make mistakes, and try out entrepreneurship as well. That was definitely one. I think second, from a personal perspective, personal side, to be honest, I think my parents were very supportive, so I did not really have anything that there was no pressure from them that why are you doing this, or you know when you're going to make money, or why did you quit your job. I think they're pretty supportive in terms of do whatever you feel like. So I think that again helped a lot in terms of even when it was not really working out for the first few years. There was no like really pressure to like shut shop and like go find a job next day. So yeah, I think from a personal perspective, I think it wasn't that difficult.
From a ability perspective, personally, none of us are really born leaders, right? While a lot of people tend to believe that leaders are born, but it's the context around which we are grown. We've grown with, it's the people that we've interacted with. So sometimes it is thrust upon us, sometimes we inherit it. What was the leadership and the growth angle around that, as far as your professional personal journey was concerned?
Yeah, I think to be honest, I think from a very young age, I had not shown any. I have not done anything which basically showed leadership. Like I was not like a captain or like a sports captain or like a first in my class, something like that. I think leadership is a mix of co-learning from peers and from everyone around you. Leadership is all a lot about listening and you know interacting with people who have much more experience than you have, and it's also a lot about patience. I think patience is very important over a long period of time, and I think even the idea of persistence becomes very important when you talk about leadership.
Awesome. So let's go into decisions. And again, the decision, the context around which a decision is made can change. So the decision could be a look like a wrong decision today. It eventually, in hindsight, sometimes it looks like the right decision. Have you what have been some decisions that have worked out and that you thought that wouldn't, and what have been some decisions that you thought would work out but actually didn't?
I think in hindsight, I think maybe the first decision itself, in terms of the category that we should focus on, was not the right one. I think we spent far more time than we should have focusing on that category, even after we had enough data that it was not really working. I think there was definitely a wrong decision on my part, where where we knew we had to maybe just try much faster and focus on what was working. Too much time was spent on things that were not working. So that was one, definitely. And in terms of things that I thought not work and worked, I think a lot of them. I'm not able to think of a specific example, but I think a lot of them. I think my idea has been that you have to try to understand and see if it works or doesn't work, and everything has to be tested. So I think there are a lot of things that I still think that won't work. But I feel like if people have enough conviction and I think there's a strong consensus internally, it may work. Then it's something that is worth trying for sure.
I see. Great. What were some skills that you had to acquire in order to grow this, lead this, and continue to lead this?
I think all of them, right? So I had no skills in management. I think I have no skills in hiring or in very little skills in finance. I think one of the biggest skills that I really like to continue focus on and build upon is, I think, on the hiring part. I think that's a very important skill to have, skill which has a lot of value also. I think hiring is definitely one skill that I really would want to invest more and improve further.
If you had to start over and do this all over again, what would you change?
I definitely would change the line of business, probably start like a food ordering app or like a online gambling company. I I think those have scaled like probably 1,000 times more than what we've been able to in the same time. But yeah, jokes aside, I think so many different things, right? I think if you have to go back in time and just do all of it again, I think there's so many small mistakes that you make which just eat up some time or the other here or there, which could have been avoided, right? So I think like it's in hindsight, as it's easy to say that you can do things differently or change, but I think all those mistakes also get you to where you are right now. So I think it's a difficult question, but maybe everything, maybe nothing. It depends on what day you ask me this question. But if today you ask me, I would say maybe everything.
That's pretty candid. In all of this, what have you found particularly helpful or advantageous?
I think creating strong connections is something that I've found very helpful. I think when we say talk about networking or meeting people, there's one thing where you just meet somebody once and that's about it. But I think if you are able to create strong relationships with people that you meet in the journey, I think that becomes a very strong advantage that you have on your side, which you know which only can be built over time, and money can't really buy it.
Right. And the amount of impact that you have delivered certainly must warm your heart, right? So this is a sort of an emotional space to be in, especially on the health side. It could be it extracts a emotional toll on the people because they're actually coming to the platform for maybe not life saving all the time, but at least life making, because if that didn't get out of their way, they possibly wouldn't be able to lead a normal life. What have been some stories that have truly touched you?
I think all of them have. I think each story has so much depth and so much emotion to it in terms of their journey, where they're coming from, how they got there. And nobody wants to be in that situation, right? But unfortunately, they are. Life has got them there. So I feel like each story has such a strong emotional background to it, and you just feel happy that you can play a small role. I think we were playing a very very small role in the larger scheme of things, but it just feels good that they get another new lease of life, and it's just a new opportunity to get back to a healthy life and potentially live their dreams.
Any stories in particular that jumped out?
Recently, we just had. I was thinking of the most recent one we had. There was this patient who she was a single mother, and her son required a liver transplant. And the story came to us, I think, 3 years back, and they were successfully able to raise about, I think, 24 lakh rupees. And her annual salary, she told me, was about 2 lakh rupees, and she's like, we could never afford this treatment. And her son was suffering from liver cirrhosis all his childhood. And I think eventually they knew that they had to get a liver transplant, but because they didn't have the money, they were just you know letting time pass. And then through crowdfunding, once they were able to raise the money, get the treatment done, she actually got her child to our office a few months back on his birthday. And she said, all of what my son wanted to do is do a cut his birthday cake with everybody in your team, and wanted to share that joy and celebration because he was able to make it on his birthday. He was able to make it till here only because of the support that Ketto and crowdfunding got him, and being able to complete his treatment. So yeah, that was pretty emotional. That was somebody that we helped came down to our office to cut his birthday cake with our team.
Awesome. What's your advice to the listeners of Maharajas of Scale, entrepreneurs that are starting out or maybe even considering something in social entrepreneurship?
I think it's a great time to be in social entrepreneurship. I feel like the whole impact investing space has grown tremendously in India. I think there's a lot of liquidity, a lot of people out there who want to support social entrepreneurs and the work that social entrepreneurs are currently doing in India. In terms of advice, I think biggest advice would be that when you start, it's not a very bad idea to have a mentor, somebody that can be a strong sounding board to you and your business outside your family, somebody who can give you some honest advice on the work that you're doing. So yeah, I would say that whatever you're trying to do, maybe a good advisor, somebody a good sounding board would be very helpful in the long term.
So on that count, do you did you cultivate a mentor or a support system in the beginning, or did you put one together later?
Actually, I made a mistake by putting one a little later, but I would definitely advise to do it, you know, as early as possible.
Okay. Are you a reader?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Okay. What are you reading right now, and what have been some recent books that have caught your attention?
Currently, I'm reading this book called "This Will Never Work." It's by Mark Randolph. He was the first CEO of Netflix. So it's about Netflix's journey and how he started Netflix and how the current CEO came on board. It's a pretty fast book. Definitely recommend that read it. I generally tend to read more about entrepreneurship and just about how people set up large companies and how they scale it up. So yeah, a bunch of them people can pick up. The Shoe Dog, Phil Knight. Then this the other one Stephen Schwarzman, the Blackstone guy.
Hmm.
Um, the book on the Cartiers.
Yeah.
Mark Pernoff, the new Salesforce book, Trailblazers. So like yeah, a bunch of tons of books out there. So yeah, I tend to read more stuff in this category. I just enjoy reading it. So yeah, these are some that I've recently read.
Awesome. So, a couple of books I want to mention. I read a lot of entrepreneurial books as well. There is a book called Range. It's about challenging the notion that you have to specialize and only being a specialist wins. And there's another book called The Alchemy, The Magic of Ideas That Don't Make Sense. It's by a guy called Rory Sutherland. Especially for a lot of us who are stuck, maybe somewhere on our startup journey, sometimes it can be a little frustrating. And these two books were pretty refreshing. So, for example, the whole 10,000 hours concept that we've heard, repeated ad nauseum. Malcolm Gladwell popularized it through Outliers. In fact, in the book Range, he debunks that theory completely. And Roger Federer, who is one of tennis greats, never went through that kind of training. And that book is full of examples like that. And in Alchemy, there are a lot of interesting ideas. If you've read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, he talks about how what sounds illogical. So, for example, this does not work. The book you're reading right now, you could take that statement and expand on it. Pretty fascinating read. I personally was very, very intrigued because he's an ad man. He comes from the creative industry, but the perspectives that he offered, were pretty fascinating. So, Varun, it's been fantastic chatting with you for close to an hour. You're doing something amazing here. What's the dream scenario for Keto next?
I think it definitely would be that we help each and every patient in this country who is short of funds and cannot pay for the medical treatment. India has the largest out-of-pocket expense healthcare market. Maximum people in India go bankrupt because of the medical expenses, and we definitely want to be the frontier solution to anybody and everybody who needs financing and funding for their healthcare treatment. Maximum people go commit suicide, go bankrupt, sell their assets because of medical expenses in India. and we want to basically play as big a role as possible, big or small role possible for these people across the country.
Awesome. Looks like you're well on the way. Star Health Insurance, which started as a standalone health insurance company, is worth thousands of crores today. They've scaled incredibly well. Looks like somewhere in there is a product, a financial product that you could create, because for copay or out of pocket, which comes out of people, nobody insures it, nobody covers it. Perhaps there is a product to be created. I don't know. I'm sure you have a better handle on that. So on that count, looks like you have things covered, your bases covered, your philosophy and your foundations great. So we wish you the very best. And when you hit your next vantage point, if that is global presence, Maharajas of Scale will be there, to talk to you about that new vantage point.
Thank you so much, Krishna. I hope so too.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day, Varun.
To you too. Thank you so much for having me. Bye bye.
We hope you enjoyed this story. If this story made a difference to you, tell us by leaving a comment on the website or our social media channels. Help us spread the love by subscribing, liking, and sharing our show. We welcome speaker suggestions and collaborations. Write to me at nida@maharajasofscale.com.